Hello everybody, this is Glenda with Fralin and Friends. Tonight, it's all different. Just for the one night, I'm going to go over how I met Charlie Bueller of my books and how I came to learn about him. And I'm going to fill you in up to the point where I start writing. Why I started writing. I know you're going to enjoy this journey. Hold on. We moved to Wymore in 1984. And my husband was born here. I grew up in Kansas. We had 3 kids, didn't really think about doing anything else besides working and raising our kids, like most average people. I was working as a nurse, Joe was working at a factory, and we were raising our kids. We'd bought this big old house in 1997. Our neighbor, who lived behind us, across the alley. We always say behind when it's someone across the alley, don't we? I mean, they're in front of us if they're across the street, they're behind us if they're across the alley. They were getting up there in years. They were older than my folks at the time. So they'd been around this town quite a while. He talked about the house, the great big house that had been next door to them on this corner on their side of the alley that was a boarding house. And that's where Charlie and his family had lived. And Charlie, when he grew up, had our house that we were living in. And it was a big house. So he loved to tell us stories. Now, we had heard gossip around town. And back then, we still had abstract instead of just title insurance. And the abstract mentioned Charlie's name on, well, it just goes with the land, but it did mention his name. That was where it all started. And I started getting kind of interested in this. I'd always heard about Charlie being Negro and the rest of the family being white, and people talked about that his mother had some affair, and people can be cruel, people can be mean, and people can be wrong. From everything that I studied from then on to find out about this man and his family, I never got any indication that his father, whose name he bore, ever held him in any less esteem than the rest of his children. And Charlie was the oldest. So if Charlie's mother had messed around, then his siblings likely wouldn't have been around. Because they just didn't put up with that. Still don't. However, what does happen still to this day is a recessive gene that may have been a dominant at one time has become recessive. They didn't understand genetics then. Charlie was born in 1885. I start the first book in 1905. They moved from Kansas to Nebraska in 1897 because this was a booming railroad town at that time. They were just building railroads through all these towns, and Marysville was the other big, the one south from Kansas. And we are about 40 miles north So in an agricultural area where there's a lot of feed being gone from one place to the other, besides the gypsum plant down there in Kansas also required a lot of that. Of course, coal went along railroads, so there were a lot more of these towns then that had these roundhouses and depots to switch trains. That was sort of the history of the town and why they came here, because they had a chance to make a living here. And so they built a huge house, and they took in boarders. And the family kept expanding. So I needed to learn more. This was what I had learned from them. I needed to learn more. So I started talking to people, and I was doing some research at the library, going through old newspapers, old census records old census records, and we were still using microfiche. And a lady there and her husband were also doing research on a family, that they were doing family research for their own purposes. And so she found out through the librarian that I was researching Charlie. And she came over because she knew him. She had known him before when he was older, and she remembered him as always having candy in his pocket for the kids, being very gentlemanly. She knew that, yes, he had been a gambler, and that his brother had been a bootlegger in the day. They're such interesting characters. I titled the first book, Who Be Charlie Be? 1905, his father is killed in an accident, and working on the railroad. They are buried in a town in Kansas where Charlie was born, and where the husband's parents are also buried. They have gone there for the funeral, and it gives Charlie an opportunity to talk to his grandfather on both sides, because both parents grew up there, so that he can learn what really happened. Was there something that his mother did do wrong? Now, whatever he found out, still they had to do a lot of lying. They had to do a lot of letting the gossip roll, because it was illegal for a white person to marry anyone with Negro blood. That didn't matter whether you looked like it or not. If you knew it was in your family and you didn't testify to it, you were illegally married. And his brothers and sisters needed to be able to get married to the people they fell in love with, which were white people, because that's the way things were done. Then I get an editor, because I'm ready to go. I've written out a whole bunch of stuff about this. I'm ready to go. I start sending her chapters. Now, Glenda, you can't just leave them naked. This is history. What the heck did they wear? Oh. And we kind of went along like that. It's like, Glenda, you've got him traveling in a railroad car. What did the car look like? Your readers need to know. We don't have passenger cars these days. What did the car look like? I mean, they do on Amtrak, but they're very modernized. The only thing I had reference to was old shows and old movies. So I did some research and found out who built them, what they looked like, the different designs and styles, and picked one, because there were several built right around this area. So that's just one thing that just goes to show you that I did a lot of work to give you a good story. Actually, a couple of them. please do subscribe. Click that notification bell. Give us a thumbs up. Comment below. Name one thing that you see is different now than what you could imagine it was then. Doesn't particularly have to be about people being dark or light. Share us, please. Gonna be back tomorrow, and we're gonna get that cemetery put together with all those little things. Joe got them all glossed, and they are ready to be placed. So we're gonna build us a cemetery tomorrow with a dead witch in it. See you then. Look in the description below to find links to the sites where you can buy these books. They are all available online as well as in your local major bookstores. Thank you. If you would like to help support this channel as well as my writing and the research I need to do for the next book and some of the travel costs, just buy my books. That's the best way, because Patreon hasn't worked. I have not reached a level where I can collect anything yet. So as far as, you know, here on YouTube, hopefully someday. But just buy my books and read them and share them. And do give them a review if you like them. Thank you.
Got it yesterday. It's got a flag underneath.